hello everyone. Thank you for joining us, and we're here for another Meet the Matchday Team session with Pavel and Matt from our art team. So first of all, I'd just like to hand over to you guys. Maybe Pavel, you want to go first? If you just want to introduce yourself and tell a little bit about your what you're doing at Matchday and your past experience in the industry.
For sure, for sure. So my name is Pavel. I've mostly been working in my career with casual games, starting with big games, King, mostly focusing on Candy Crush for many years. Also working with other companies like Space Masters, Big Games, Miniclip, and Legendary. So mostly these companies produce casual and arcade. This is where my focus was for about 10 years, something like that. So it's very fascinating the way I started in general working with the games. I remember being in this art private school where we learned mostly animation and a little bit of art. And eventually I started to work with a company that produced cartoons, 2D, 3D, and somehow I met friends, the ones that been building indie games. Their game never actually been released, but I was part of that project and was met fun. This is where I realized that, hey, it's actually as fun as playing games. Maybe more complex, but hey, it's all great. And eventually, pretty quickly, actually, I started to work with casual games. So this is where my passion is, and this is where I'm now with Matchday. And my role in Matchday is art lead. I'm mostly focusing on, well, actually, the whole vision of the game, which is both art and UI.
Nice one.
In
Sorry.
short, yeah.
You go ahead. You continue.
That's it. That was like a short story.
Great. Thank you very much for that, Pavel. That's a very, very nice introduction. Matt, if you'd like to go next and tell the listeners a bit about what you're doing at Matchday and what you've been doing previously.
Absolutely. Hello, everybody. Pleasure to chat with everyone today. So for Matchday, I'm currently helping set up the art direction because we're building the games up from scratch. So trying to set a direction that that we feel is going to be appealing. And you may have seen some of our very early concept art posted by our great community team. Trying to establish a direction that ticks our boxes for the brand, for our players, for where we want to go. And my background is extremely different to what I'm doing right now. So for 20 years, I was the art director of FIFA. AAA console juggernaut of a game, and I watched that game grow from a really fairly successful sports game into what it is today. And I was just looking, I'd done that and I wanted to do something very different. I wanted to work setting something up and trying to help a team and work with, awesome artists like Pavel. That's why when the opportunity came up to help out Matchday, I jumped at it and very, very happy to be working with Pavel, trying to set up the visual style and the overall art direction for Matchday games.
Great, thank you. Yeah, that leads us on very nicely to the next question, which was just going to be: could you maybe between you, I don't know who wants to go first, but if you want to speak a little bit more about how you actually work together and how does it work on the art team? How do you do things as a group?
So Matt, maybe you can start and.
Yeah, sure. Pavel's only actually been with Matchday for just over a week. So we haven't fully established how we work together, but I can tell you how it's working. So Pavel's in Europe and I'm on the west coast of North America in Vancouver. So we're separated by, Pavel's 10 hours ahead of me. So it's a proper remote work relationship. So what we do is we try and check in. I think probably at least 3 times a week. We have great creative chats. They're very enjoyable. We tend to chat for about an hour. I think we've already had 3 1-hour meetings this week. So we try and connect at the beginning of my day and the end of Pavel's day, so that we're really able to make the most out of, what am I doing when Pavel's sleeping, and what's he doing while I'm sleeping. And I try and set. So the trick is, I think, if when you're working together, is you want to give people the freedom to have fun and be creative, particularly at this stage in what we're trying to do. So the way I try and art direct is try and set a framework. So what are the key words? What's kind of the visual space we want to be in? And then Pavel's great concept artist, so create a framework where then he can, during his day, go in there and have some fun with the concepts, come up with some ideas without me being too prescriptive. And then we get together, discuss those, and then figure out what we both need to do next. That's quite a simple way of describing it. It can get quite complex, but essentially, I would say that's how our working relationship is emerging. Would you agree with that, Pavel?
Yeah, sure. And thing that I want to add, I'm having a blast, like pure pleasure, like working together. Almost like thing that I like the most is that we're having constant sync every day. This is what I call a really great like optimization like of all our process, because we try to move quite quick, I would say, and this is where the energy is, and it just feels very enjoyable and very rewarding by end of every week. So yeah, the process are actually amazing because it took us almost, it's been 2 weeks together, and I'm already having like pure blast. So that's like a gift.
Well, that's great to hear. Very glad to hear you're enjoying it. I'm sorry to have thrown you under the bus with a question about what's happening when you've only been here very recently. Sorry about that. So the next question I was going to ask is, so we spoke a little bit about how you work together, but in terms of the creative process and how you start the approach of bringing a game to life, how where do you start with that, and where do you go from there? Pavel, I don't know if you want to start on that one.
Yeah, for sure. So it's all starting with a vision, and defining which we help defining vision of it, starting with the mood boards, and understanding what is approximate way that we want to take. And Matt mostly is the one who's creating the art direction, and this is where we start. And eventually, we start concepting. We start defining, like narrowing down all the ideas, all the vision, and start like create a lot of sketches, something that is very quick for us to understand if that feels right, if that feels smart, if that actually a great fit for the casual game. Um, I would say this is where it's all started. I think Matt can even talk more about this, as he's the one who's leading the direction.
Thanks, Pavel. So it's I think when you're building something from nothing, you need to start with who are you, who's the art for. So who do we want to play the game? What type of game do we want to make? And then you have to look at what's important about, in this case, the Matchday brand. So, for example, we want to be authentic. We want to have an authentic tone of voice. We want to break barriers. We want to be super inclusive. We don't care who you are, where you are in the world. We just want you to come into our world and have a good time and connect with people. So if that's those are great brand pillars. So how can you integrate those into a visual style? And then the other key thing when you're building games, as opposed to sort of non-interactive entertainment like TV or movies or what have you, is we want people to play this game. So what's the creative direction, and how can the visuals follow the creative direction and enhance the creative direction? So Pavel and I also work very closely with Paul, who I believe did one of these AMAs last week or the week before. So the three of us get together at least twice a week. Paul's in Paris, so we're definitely an international trio. The more we chat, the more we generate ideas. But what you need to do first is you basically keep creating frameworks. So you've got a framework created by the brand. That's your starting point, and then a framework created inside that of what type of game you want to be, what's the game design, and you keep narrowing it down until you can make definite decisions. And whilst you're narrowing it down, as Pavel said, you create mood boards. So you're always trying to position yourself amongst in the world, whether it's in the world of console games, casual games, in the world of football, in the world of the Matchday brand. Where does the visual direction sit, and how are we enhancing the experience of playing the game? So I always like to use the phrase visual experience, because we want good looking visuals, we want appealing and charming visuals, but we don't want them to be charming but impact the gameplay in a negative way. They always want to enhance. So how it's visual experience that's helping support the game experience. And generally, if you look at really successful games, that's what the visuals do. I mean, take an example Pavel mentioned a minute ago that he worked on. Candy Crush is a great example of that. A very, very successful game, a fun game to play, a game that you can come back to after years away from it, and you still know how to play it. And the visuals really support the mechanic, and it just feels great moving the candy around and triggering the special effects. But that those devices are not there just to look pretty. They're there to support the underlying mechanic. So that's kind of how we approach visual direction. You're always trying to, go broad, entertain lots of ideas, but you can't keep going with that. Otherwise, you never get to a point where you can make a decision and move to the next stage, which is to go from concept, thinking about, okay, how do we now start to producing art that we can put in front of people and say, this is what the game's going to look like. What do you think? Whether that's people internal to Matchday, or whether that's the community. So yeah, you keep creating frameworks inside frameworks, keep narrowing down your focus, and then you can keep asking people what they think. Because the other key is to be aligned with all of with all of your colleagues in the studio, with the community, so that when you finish and when you say this is what we've produced, everyone's like, yeah, that's amazing. That's what we expected to see. So that's really how we approach it. And then obviously, if you've got someone like Pavel who's iterating on those concepts every day, who I'm not sure Pavel stops working, to be honest. It's just a pleasure to iterate on it, and it's a lot of fun. But you've got to make sure that the fun is always also being applied to focusing the vision and driving it down into something that can not just apply to the first game we do, but anything we might do in the future, and can transfer potentially, if we need it to, from a phone to the web, etc. So just trying to anticipate where we might want to use our art direction style guide in the future as well. And that's a little bit trickier because you don't always know, so you have to guess a little bit, but you have to kind of think about that.
And one thing worth mentioning, it's about the passion as well. Obviously, we all can do our job great, but whenever you have passion, in this case, passion for football, you kind of generate idea with more fun, with more maybe exotic elements. You understand much more of the fans, what they need, and how would they react. And talk about more about production. We think about technology as well. For instance, it's very important for us to support low-end devices. Let's say phones like iPhone 6 and further. For us, it's very important that these beautiful graphics, this appealing, great looking art and effects, they actually perform well on more older devices, which is quite important as well. Just a little notes here.
Yeah. Okay. Nice one. Well, yeah. So you mentioned then about bringing through the passion and the fun, and Pavel, you mentioned about the football and the fan side. Are you both football fans? Is that something that you're bringing through from your personal experience, or how do you sort of bring through that kind of football fan passion? Pavel, do you wanna go on that one?
Yeah, for sure. For me, it's a very interesting story because I remember back in my teenage years, I actually was playing as a junior in the basketball
Oh, nice.
team, and and my friend he was like forcing me to play football because that's great. And I remember one day I decided, okay, let's do it. And it actually was mad fun. But later on, 15 minutes later, I actually crashed my arm in like three
Oh
pieces.
no.
That was that was
Yeah.
unexpectable, but it's very interesting because I always liked sports. I still love them a lot. And eventually, one of my colleagues back from Candy Crush time, he was a big fan of Liverpool because he was from Liverpool. And back in Stockholm, they used to have a club. Obviously, there's still a club, and we started to go there together, enjoy time together. And I was like, man, I was missing out so much because the crowd, the energy, the songs, it's all so fun. This is the definition of great passion. And this is where I started loving football much more, and eventually living with football. And since then, it is a passion. I have at least three favorite teams, and
You're gonna have to tell us
yeah,
who, Pavel. You're gonna have to tell us who.
man. So first, obviously Liverpool.
Yes, Pavel. Yes.
Yes,
Nice.
Bar- Barcelona,
Yeah. Good. We'll take that as well.
and guess the third one,
Oof.
the PSG,
PSG. Okay,
the
fair. I
PSG. Oh,
sense
for
I
sure.
sense some Lionel Messi influence there.
Yeah, for sure.
Good
That's
choice.
the one.
Yeah. And Matt, what about you? How I mean, I know you're a football fan, but is that helping to bring through the fan and the passionate side to the project?
Yeah, I think definitely. So I'll go straight away that I'm an Arsenal fan,
Very happy at the
and
moment, I
obviously
imagine.
very happy at the moment. Although I will be happier after if we can beat Manchester
Mm.
City in the next few days. That will make me very happy indeed after losing the FA Cup game to them. Um, so yeah, Arsenal fan, not been happy for quite a while. Happier this year, and then uh, perennially disappointed England fan. Again, I've been happier in recent years. But I would love to see England win something in my lifetime. So we'll see how that goes. Um, I think being a football fan definitely helps. You know, we're we're making a football game, and you need to understand elements of the sport in order to be able to make sure that you can. We want to feel distinctly football. We want to make sure we're authentic, but also, you want your own style. You want, like I said before, you want the matchday brand and a matchday art direction style that we can own, but while still remaining authentic to the sport. And to find that space, if it's easier if you're a football fan, and just understanding, uh, what do people love about the sport? How do people support the sport? Um, Depending on what kind of game you're making, how do people view the sport? How do they digest their game? Because that's very different between older fans and younger fans, and it can be important to know that. So it's just easier. Like, you can do it if you're not a football fan, but then it's more about, more of a research project. Whereas if you're a football fan, you're still doing the research. But I mean, honestly, for like 20 years, um, I've been able to watch football at work and call it working, which is fantastic. Or, sit and watch highlights on YouTube, which is something I really enjoy doing, and I would do it anyway. But I can also call it work. So I think when your passions align with your profession, there's a place there that can bring you a lot of joy. And if you are working with people who are also in a similar place, and it's just an easy way football's a great way to get to know people, and that's something that Pavel, Paul, and I have in common. So we can chat about that if we want to, because none of us have been working together too long, that long really. But I'm already impressed with the relationship we're building and having a common language. So Paul is also an Arsenal fan, so we can gang up on Pavel a little bit next year, hopefully when Arsenal are back in the Champions League. But you know, I think that little bit of banter and it's just an extra way to enjoy what you're doing for a living. So yeah, I think it's important. It definitely helps. It's not essential, but it definitely helps a lot.
Yeah.
What I really want to add here is, as an artist, whenever you create art, most of the time you think as a professional, but sometimes it's so useful to think as a football fan or as a somebody who's really who's really into the NFT world and football world, and having that perspective, understanding that really helps a lot with creating visuals. That's for sure.
Yeah, I could definitely back you up on that, Pavel, because the stuff that I've seen from you, you can really see that coming through. Yeah, I think you completely agree that the passion is becoming very evident there. So yeah, that's very, very good to have. We have had some questions on Discord from Madic. Hello, Madic. Thank you again for joining us. He's in the space now as well, so thank you, Madic. What I'm going to, I think that the questions he's asked are slightly too specific about future sort of artistic decisions, but I'm going to kind of like slightly alter his second question and maybe put it to you first, Matt, because you were speaking then about sort of giving Matchday, you know, like its own identity, its own sort of like way of standing out as its own product. How do you work towards that? How do you sort of like work towards giving a game more sort of value or intrigue through its unique visual identity? Because that just must be such a. I mean, I'm thinking about it now, and it seems like impossible. Where do you even begin with something like that?
It's a good question. There's different ways of doing it, but for Matchday specifically, there's already been some work done. So I mean, Matchday as a company is bigger than just games. So you have a Matchday company brand, and then we also have a content brand guide that's associated with the cards themselves. So if you look at some of the cards, they use some really lovely, strong, bold colours. So you look at what's there already, and then you look at who do we want to appeal to, which for match day is, and for a lot of casual games is very, very broad. So then what you can do is you can look at, well, if this is what's already established for the brand, and this is who we want our visual tone and style to appeal to, what do we think is the anti-vision of that? What would alienate people? And you can work on that, because that gives you a contrast. So you're looking at like, well, if we think that alienates people and we all agree on that, what's the opposite of that? And you start to look for it. And then the more, as an artist, the more, or as a creative group, the more you look at things and talk, the more it's really just about ideating and chatting and ideating and chatting, and and you'll find your way through, and that's really how you do it, whether you are looking at rebranding the Premier League or coming up with a visual direction for match day. So you really are just looking for, like I said, like ways to position what you're doing. So it's a casual game. Okay, yep. We want to play it on a phone. Awesome. We want the phone to be in portrait mode, and we want you to be able to play the game whilst on a busy metro. We need to play it with your thumb because your other hand is busy holding on in a crowded train carriage. It's like that. Those are great statements. And then the other thing you can do is say that Pavel and I, Paul, and actually we're looking at today, is you can write down what you want people to say when they see the visuals. So, you know, I want the visuals, like, oh, wow, those visuals feel like I'm in a cyberpunk universe. It could be one. Uh, that wouldn't be one that we'd necessarily apply to Matchday, but that's that, or wow, I'll give you one. I'll give you one that we're using, which is, wow, I'd love to have a real model of that sitting on my desk, or um, that feels really inviting. I can't wait to play. Those kind of statements are really useful because not everyone can necessarily critique art, but most people, particularly when we're working with our colleagues in Matchday Studios, people can critique a statement. It's like, do you agree with that statement? Well, yeah, I like it, but I don't like the use of that word or that word. You can get aligned on it, and then anytime you're producing a visual direction, you can cross-reference it against your statement. So if you come up with, if you say, right, I want this game to be charming and inviting, and then I put a reference image of, from from Alien the movie. I'm just trying to think of an extreme. They do not match. It's a great movie, but it's not inviting.
That's very fair statement.
Yeah. So you say, I find this style charming. I can't wait to play. It's like, well, what visuals out there, probably in casual games, do we feel ticks that box? And then do they feel appropriate for a game that we're saying is also authentically football? So then you can start to contrast it. So you've got games out there that are very, very charming, but they might be aimed at a younger audience, or it might be a more of a city tycoon game. So they're quite busy with architecture or whatever it is. It's like, well, yeah, we like that style, but it feels too young, or it feels too busy, or it feels too gritty. And you really start to narrow down your choices by being able to compare them to kind of those player statements, almost is what I would call them, and also the overall brand universe that you exist in, and the casual game space. So you've got to think of a lot of things. So the trick is to be able to work through those things in an order that makes sense, and then obviously you have to map that to the time you have. So if you're rebranding like a massive corporation, you might have that might be something that you do over a year. Whereas the speed at which we work is very different for that. So it's like, okay, because you can just keep going with your research. So it's like, one of the things Pavel and I and Paul talk about a lot is, on a Friday morning for me, Friday afternoon for Pavel and Paul, we meet with the rest of our colleagues from the Matchday Game Studio, and kind of do an update. So that's our target. What do we want to say in that meeting? What do we want to communicate, to see what people think in order to align, and then seeing how people react, then we can figure out what we're going to do the next week. So we work on a weekly cadence, which is great. Very fast paced. You have to make some decisions, but that's kind of fun. It means you can't spend too long noodling things, as I call it. You have to. And you have to be organised about your thought process as well, because otherwise you will find you've spent all week looking at one design. If you go into that meeting on Friday with that one thing, and people are like, "Oh, I don't really think it matches that statement you said about being charming and inviting," then you've got a problem, because you've just lost a week. So move fast. Always understand what the overall direction is, what the overall framework is. So that's one we're using right now, me and Pavel, and I'm trying to design, a gameplay environment, and a stadium is does it feel charming? Does it feel like I can reach out and touch it? Would it be something I'd want to, buy as a little model and have it on my desk? Those are all criteria that Pavel and I use when reviewing our work and chatting about it. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. It was very, and I completely get that point you're making about would I want it at my desk, because I've actually got in front of me now one of the work in progress images we shared earlier today on our Twitter that I believe Pavel did of a trophy that's kind of like almost as like stylistically as a building. So Pavel, you shared that with us, and then the 2D model, and then a render of a rough model. If do you know the
Yeah,
yeah, you know the image I'm referring to? Yeah.
for
Sure,
sure.
yeah. So could you just maybe like talk us a bit through sort of what the process was, like sort of what the process is going from having that idea to, what's required, and what kind of level of work needs to go into it, and how is that useful to you in the design process?
All right. So one of the ideas that we've been thinking about is having a football park. So park is a space. Let's imagine Disneyland, something that has a multiple attractions. So multiple attractions in the game is features, and the main one is actually playing actual playing game. So as you guys see in this trophy on Twitter, this this is one of the buildings that is very stylized. It's something that you will almost never see in the world, but it's possible to build. So it's kind of like in between both worlds. So I thought in this process about doing something extremely fun, again, like Disneyland. Processes are quite straightforward. We have an idea, in this case about the park, and this is one of them. And we started sketching. We started sketching about, like, different variations. Let's say one of them was cozy town sort of a vibe. The other one more like a sim city that is a big like environment. And in this case, was focusing on the smaller, cozier kind of environment, which is a small city. And the trophy itself, as far as I remember, is the attraction called collections. Collections is where you collect all your trophies during your lifetime in the game. Trophies, potentially cards, this kind of stuff. And obviously, just to experiment, because we we're thinking about potentially having 3D, and this where I decided to build a very simple, a raw version of this 2D concept. It helped us to understand more what kind of visuals do we want to use. Do we want to use maybe a render images? Do we want to use 3D space as everything that is a 3D, like 3D game in general? So yeah, it's sketching, it's color sketching, is modeling, and eventually when we narrow down the vision, this is where we start polishing and creating something more mature, I would say.
Great, nice one. Yeah, it's really interesting to see how that comes to life and to hear more about, the benefits for you for doing that. You've also very kindly shared with us some more concept art, which we will be sharing on social media and Discord after this session, of ideas for maybe how the stadium could look on the mobile game. Before people see that, could you give us a bit more sort of insight, Pavel, into like the thought process and the kind of things you have to consider for that, and what sort of things you've been testing out there?
Right. So we've been testing a lot of things. Again, as Matt mentioned, we've been focusing on something that is very charming, very appealing for the fans. So I personally, when I design stadiums, I think about myself, is it something that I personally want to visit? How would that feel about being inside the stadium? So the thought process is creating something that is modern, something that is very attractive to the eye, quite easy to understand, and very authentic. It can, for me, it's important when it screams that yes, this is modern, this is football. It's all about the green grass. It's all about modern texture. Um, yeah, I would say briefly, yeah, something like this.
Yeah, okay. No, that's good to hear. And keep an eye out for that, everyone, because we will be sharing those images after this call on social media and on Discord. Matt, if I could just come back to you, you've both been working in the industry for a long time. There's so many different things to consider. How do you keep yourself inspired, and how do you sort of motivate yourself to keep pushing the boundaries of the artistic identity of the products you're creating?
That's a great question. Yeah, so I've been in the games industry for about 25 years. I think if there's a quote that if you're so I can't remember the exact quote, but if your job is a hobby, you won't realise you're working, or something along those lines. It's tough to maintain that the whole time, but I think it comes back to are you enjoying what you're doing? Because if you work as a specialist, if you're a professional video game artist, or professional engineer, or whatever it is, any kind of specialist, that takes a lot of practice and a lot of work when you're young, and there's a lot of competition in the world, so it's not easy, but normally it's, for myself anyway, I can't speak to Pavel, but I suspect the journey was probably the same, which is you don't start off saying I want to be a video game artist. You just start drawing and realize it's something that you really love, or painting or what have you. So it just brings you joy, and it's something that you can lose yourself in. And anything that you're so immersed in that you forget about the time is generally something that you're passionate about. And when you find that and you're younger, you want to if you can channel that into a career, awesome. But the trick is to keep being able to do that. So when I was working for EA Sports and doing FIFA, even though we make that game every year, when you if I look at that game 20 years ago and look at what it is today, and I was the art director of it for about 15 of those years, there's been some major progress. And for that game, I really enjoyed, that FIFA always is at the forefront of new technology. So if a new console comes out, FIFA will be a launch title. So you're always right there. Like when the PlayStation 5 launched, I was working on that a couple of years before it went public, and that's really exciting. What can you do with the graphics? But that game's about how do you get closer and closer to reality. And after 20 years, I felt like I didn't know how much more value I could provide, and I felt it was time for a change. Matchday is a very different challenge, which is about getting much closer to the work, and trying to build something from the ground up, which is what Pavel and I are trying to do with art. So right now we're trying to build a game from the ground up, but depending on how things go, we hope to be looking at building out a team as well, and that can be that's a lot of fun. So what's bringing me joy at the moment, and stimulating my passion, is working in a fast-paced environment, working in a very, very different place to what I've been used to. So there's a level of discomfort in that's also important for professional engagement. If you get really, really, you kind of see this with footballers actually. If they get a bit too comfortable, professional footballers can lose their edge. Whereas the players that are always trying to improve, they tend to be the ones that they're always trying to improve their skills. They're always trying to improve their diet, their fitness regime. Those are the ones who tend to have a really, really long career. It's the same for everybody else. What are you doing that's stimulating you? What are you doing that's putting you in a new place that initially feels maybe professionally uncomfortable? And you're like, oh, I haven't done this before. I don't know how to do everything. But that's the joy. That's the joy of it. You learn how to do it. Then you feel like, oh, I've become competent at that. And then if you keep doing it, you can become expert at it, hopefully. And then you can go, right, what else can I add to bring me joy? But right now, we're really early on match day, and it's just the fun of there's nothing there, but there's a lot of ambition, and that ambition that I see from everyone involved in setting up match day is tremendous. It's great, and I love seeing that energy and that passion to be like, this is what we want to build. This is what we want to bring to billions of football fans. This is how we want to try and do it. And it's like, yeah, I'm on board with that. That's really exciting. I want to come and try and help you with my skills, and work with Pavel and work with Paul, to build games that ideally like people love to play. And I think the great thing about playing games is that's something that people can lose themselves in as well. And games can bring a lot of joy to people. It can be for a couple of minutes, or it can be for a few hours, or for some people, it can be all night, depending what game you're playing. And that's why you do it. Ultimately, I don't want to work on games that people don't want to play. And that was one of my reasons for working on FIFA, because a lot of people play that game. And now it's like, well, can we build some games inside the Matchday universe that bring people joy, that people love to play, and that kind of, that's the fire that keeps your passion going, as long as as well as the the opportunity to iterate on a new art style and something that's trying to recreate and faithfully recreate Anfield and Liverpool fans and the Liverpool team, so that when you look at it in the game, it looks exactly like Klopp, or it looks exactly like Salah. That's one challenge, but the Matchday challenge is a very different one for that. I've met the challenge of trying to reproduce real players, and now I want to do something else. So that's how you keep the passion alive. Make yourself uncomfortable, see new challenges, meet them, overcome them with people that you love working with, and move on to the next one. And that seems to work quite well for me, at least.
That was very well put, Matt. But at the same time, it did put a big fear into me trying to work out how many days and nights I've lost to Football Manager. So,
Yeah.
very good point
Yeah.
there. I guess we'll just come to the last question now that I would put to both of you. But you mentioned there, Matt, a lot about how important it is, obviously, for the fans and the players to enjoy the game that we're making. We're always talking on Discord and Twitter about how much we want, feedback and comments and suggestions from our users on how we can make the game better. How does that? I'll start with you, Matt, and then if we want to go to you, Pavel. But how does that sort of user feedback? How does that help shape what you're doing? How do you take that on board and use it to as part of your process? Matt, do you wanna go for that one?
Oh, sorry, I've muted my
That's all
mic
right.
accidentally. I think it's fantastic. Like the more you can get a sense of what people think, whether they're inside Matchday or outside, particularly from people who your target audience, ideally, it's great. But the challenge is that people are giving their personal opinion, which is absolutely valid. But what happens if you get two competing pieces of feedback from two different people because they like two different things? So you have to have a way of calibrating what everybody says, which is where you go back to that framework I said earlier. So you understand what your key deliverables are, and then when you get the feedback, you can react and you can use it as something to push you in a new direction or a better direction, or to improve what you've already done. I mean, obviously, if everyone says, "Wow, I love that," or "Oh my God, I hate that," you can quite easily react to that. But it's when you get competing feedback that you've got to figure out. You need to know what you're trying to achieve, and then you can apply feedback to it and draw something really helpful out of that. But in terms of the the relationship and the connection to the community, I think that's absolutely wonderful. I really do.
I'm on the same page, Sheriff. I treat it as a gift because, first of all, it feels like we are united. We are building this game all together, us, the team, and the fans. And in general, I was thinking about this a lot. How crazy fun and good it is um, whenever we read all these patterns, good ones, bad ones, about any of our designs. We tested. We have this luxury of testing every idea if we think it's good enough, or if we think it makes sense for us to release, and share it with the fans, get our feedback. I think it's an amazing approach that I love to have, and yeah, overall, it just feels more alive. Whenever you build anything inside a team, we all have sort of like the same perspective, even though we're all different. But whenever we go outside the box, so basically going to Discord, reading all the comments on our latest sketches, designs, etc., it just gives us a more fresh kind of like perspective, which again, I think it's a gift.
It absolutely is a gift. Very well put. Yeah, absolutely. Everyone, all our followers on Discord and social media, please keep your suggestions and your feedback coming. It really is a big help. I know I say that on everything that you can hear my voice on, but we really do appreciate it. And yeah, we take it all on board, and it is all being read. So we really do appreciate that. And I think with that we would come to the end of the session. So I just want to say, Pavel and Matt, a massive thank you to both of you. It was really interesting hearing more about your process, and I've got to say, like all the work in progress stuff we've been showing on social media and Discord, I always love seeing it. I think it's really interesting to see the game come into life, and I know that our users do too. And yeah, just keep up the good work, because every time I see something you share with us, I feel like a kid on Christmas. I'm like, there's a new drawing. And yeah, it's really great. So thank you very much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
It's been a pleasure.
And thanks for everyone who's listening in. Really appreciate that. And hopefully we can all speak again soon.
Yeah, I agree.
Awesome.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much for that, everyone who listened, and we will see you on the next one. So cheers and goodbye for now.
Bye-bye.